Today we're going to be testing the NCP702MX series of evaluation boards, which are low dropout linear regulators from ON Semiconductor. The equipment we're going to be using for today's test consists of an oscilloscope, an ammeter, 2 voltmeters, a DC power supply, a waveform generator, and a DC electronic load. For our first test, please make sure both of your jumpers are between the middle pin and the right pin, so that your V input serves as the enable. For the purposes of this test, we're going to be using the NCP702MX28, which has an output voltage of 2.8 volts. So for our input, we're going to set it to 0.3 volts greater than that, which in our case is 3.1 volts. So set your DC source to 3.1 volts and enable it. Set your DC electronic load to 0.01 amps and enable it. You should see your output voltage remain roughly 2.8 or your rated voltage. To test load regulation of your board, set your output current on your DC electronic load to 1 milliamp and enable it. And you should see your output voltage is still roughly 2.8 volts or your rated voltage. For our final load regulation test, set your output current on your DC electronic load to 150 milliamps and enable it. Just as before, the output should be your rated output, which in our case is 2.8 volts. Next, return your output current to 10 milliamps and increase your DC voltage to be 1.3 volts greater than the rated output, which in our case is 4.1 volts input now. And just as before, note your output is roughly your rated output voltage, for us 2.8 volts. Now to test the enable feature of your board, please move your upper jumper to the other position, which would be left and middle, so that the enable is now from the enable pin rather than the input pin. Before re-enabling your load and voltage source, please make sure your voltage source is set to 0.3 volts greater than your nominal output, which in our case is still 3.1 volts in, and your output current is 10 milliamps. Please note your output voltage at this point should be 0 volts, not the rated output, because the enable pin is currently set to the signal generator, which is off. With your signal generator set to high Z mode, please go to the square wave setting, set the frequency to 10 Hertz, the high level to 0.9 volts, the low level to 0 volts, and the duty cycle to 10% or as close as you can get to it. Now enable your signal generator and make sure your output is switching as per your enable. Lastly, take your upper jumper and move it from the left and middle to the middle and right, and take your bottom jumper and move it from middle and right to left and middle. Now that we have moved the jumpers for the final test, make sure all of your equipment is off and move your ammeter cable from amps to microamps, ensuring it's still on DC, and set your DC input voltage to 0.3 volts greater than the nominal, which in our case is 3.1 volts in, and enable it. You should note your output voltage should be roughly 0 and your input current should be extremely low. This concludes the test of the NCP702MX series of evaluation boards. For more information, please visit www.onsemi.com or contact an authorized distributor.